The streets of East London fell silent that autumn of 1888, not from peace but from fear, a fear that kept women behind locked doors and men looking over their shoulders. Fear that manifested each morning as residents anxiously opened their newspapers, dreading what headline might scream back at them. It began with a body discovered in the early hours of August 31st. A woman's throat cut with such precision that witnesses said she barely bled before death took her. But what followed, the methodical mutilation of her body, told authorities this was no ordinary crime of opportunity. By the time the second victim was found just 8 days later, London had transformed. The bustling metropolis, heart of the world's greatest empire, found itself paralyzed by an invisible predator who melted into the shadows after each kill, leaving behind only his gruesome signature. The butchery escalated with each victim, the wounds becoming more deliberate, more exploratory. Body parts arranged, organs removed, some never found. And then came the letters, taunting notes delivered to police and press alike. "Catch me when you can," they read. A killer giving himself a name that would echo through centuries of criminal history. A name that crystallized all the horror and mystery of these acts into two simple words. While the killer claimed many victims, 5 are considered his definitive work. 5 women whose final moments became the foundation of modern criminal investigation. 5 deaths that would generate over 1,000 suspects, yet never a conviction. The East End of London in 1888 was a world apart from the grandeur celebrated in the Empire's propaganda. Here, amid the docklands and factories, nearly 500,000 souls were crammed into decaying tenements and narrow alleys. Crime thrived in these shadows. Theft, assault and exploitation formed the daily backdrop of existence. Most residents lived hand to mouth, one misfortune away from destitution. For women especially, options were cruelly limited. Factory work, domestic service, or the dangerous night trade of selling their bodies, these were often the only paths available. The first victim was discovered by a cart driver making his early morning rounds. The scene described by police documents reveals both shocking violence and peculiar restraint. Her throat was severed with 2 distinct cuts, the work of someone with knowledge of anatomy. Word spread quickly. The newspapers, always hungry for sensation, devoted columns to the gruesome details, but few could imagine this was merely the opening act. A week passed with the city on edge. Then in the pre-dawn hours of September 8th, a second woman was discovered in a backyard off Hanbury Street. The wounds followed the same pattern, throat cut first, followed by abdominal mutilations. But now the killer had taken something with him. Organs had been removed and were missing from the scene. The removal of organs suggested medical knowledge. Witness statements, while contradictory, repeatedly described a man of average height and build, well-dressed, with nothing to distinguish him from any other gentleman walking these streets. Police increased patrols. Citizens formed vigilance committees. The poorest district in London transformed into the most watched neighborhood in the world. Yet somehow, the killer continued to move freely, invisible among the thousands. September 30th became known as the double event. 2 women killed in the same night, less than an hour apart. The first was discovered in Dutfield's yard with her throat cut. The lack of other wounds suggested the killer had been interrupted, but he wasn't finished with his work that night. Less than a mile away and less than an hour later, the second victim of the night was found in Mitre Square. This time the killer had enough time. The facial mutilations were extreme. a kidney was removed and something new, a message written in chalk, was found on a nearby wall. Authorities quickly erased the message, fearing it would incite riots. This decision would be questioned by investigators for generations to come. The investigation grew to an unprecedented scale. Over 2,000 people were interviewed. More than 300 were investigated further. Bloodhounds were brought in to track the scent. Undercover officers disguised themselves as women to patrol the streets. Then came the communications. Letters arrived at police stations and newspaper offices. Some were obvious hoaxes, but others contained details only the killer could know. One included half a human kidney claimed to be taken from a victim. Medical examination confirmed it matched the missing organ's description. The letters gave the nameless predator his infamous title, a name that would generate more books, films, and theories than any other criminal case in history. As October crept toward November, the city held its breath. Had the increased police presence finally deterred the killer? Some dared to hope the nightmare had ended. They were wrong. November 9th, a landlord's assistant went to collect rent from a small room in Miller's Court. When no one answered, he peered through a window. What he saw made him run for the police. The scene inside room 13 was beyond description. The official police photographer, who had documented countless crime scenes, was so affected by what he witnessed that his hands trembled too badly to operate his camera. The fifth victim had suffered wounds so extensive that identification required careful examination. The killer had spent hours, not minutes, with the body. The room showed evidence of calculated, methodical work. And then, as suddenly as it began, the killing stopped. Theories abounded. Had the killer died, been imprisoned for another crime, moved away, or had he simply completed whatever twisted purpose drove him? The investigation continued for years. Each new commissioner of police inherited the unsolved case file. Leads were followed across continents. Suspects were interrogated, but conclusive evidence remained elusive. Today, more than 130 years later, the case remains officially unsolved, but the fascination endures. Professional investigators have spent careers analyzing the limited evidence. Medical experts have scrutinized autopsy reports. Historians have combed through thousands of documents. The suspect list reads like a cross-section of Victorian society. A Polish barber, a physician to the wealthy, a barrister, an artist, a butcher, even a member of the royal household. Each theory has its passionate defenders. Each has compelling evidence and devastating holes. Modern criminal profiling suggests the perpetrator was likely a male between 28 and 36 years old. Physically strong but unremarkable in appearance. Someone familiar with the area who could blend in effortlessly. Someone with basic anatomical knowledge, perhaps a butcher, medical student, or surgeon. What makes this case so enduring is not just the violence, but the questions it raises about society itself. How could someone commit such acts in public places yet vanish without trace? What does it tell us about the limitations of justice, about our fascination with the darkest human behaviors? The 5 women who lost their lives were real people with hopes, struggles, and stories of their own. In death, they became footnotes to their killer's legend, a pattern repeated too often in true crime narratives. Perhaps the most important legacy of this case is how it transformed criminal investigation. Detailed crime scene photography, preservation of evidence, criminal profiling. Many techniques now considered standard practice emerged from the frustrating failures of this investigation. If these crimes occurred today, DNA evidence, surveillance footage, digital communications, and forensic science would likely identify the perpetrator within days. But in 1888, investigators had only their eyes, their experience, and their intuition. The autumn of 1888 cast a shadow that stretches across centuries. 5 lives violently ended. A killer never brought to justice. A mystery that continues to captivate our darkest curiosities. We may never know the true identity of the killer who stalked Whitechapel. But the questions this case raises about justice, about evil, about human nature itself, remain as relevant today as they were on those fog-shrouded streets over a century ago. Some mysteries refuse to rest, some questions have no final answers, and sometimes the not knowing is what keeps us coming back to the story, searching the shadows for a truth that may forever elude us. This has been Jack the Ripper, the mystery that still haunts London. Thank you for watching.